everybody. Welcome back to From the Other Sideline. I'm Melissa Treebwasser, your host, here with Frogs today. Very special guest this evening as we get ready for a top 20 matchup in Austin. College game day is in town. TCU and Texas are playing. TCU just recently ranked number 4 in the second round of the college football playoffs, and they get to put that ranking on the line against an old familiar rival, both on the field and in the coaching box. In order to get all of the information from the Longhorn perspective, I reached out for one of the good ones. Can't find many of them, right? No, I'm just kidding. One of my very favorite Longhorns, one of my favorite people on these internets, Gerald Goodridge of Longhorn Pod, part of the SB Nation, Burnt Orange Nation podcast network, et cetera, et cetera. Gerald, how are you?
I'm doing all right. It's Taco Tuesday in the Goodrich household. My kids are asleep, so I don't really need anything else in the world.
Nothing more than to talk football, right? I mean,
right?
that's what better way to possibly finish off your evening.
Yeah.
So we've had many of these discussions over the years, many of these TCU Texas games. I feel like we've covered all of the bases that could potentially be covered. And then we're going to turn to this week, and all of a sudden, both of these programs are kind of living in very weird and different worlds. TCU, which has been, I mean, I don't want to call the team I root for irrelevant, but it's been pretty irrelevant for most of the last 4 seasons, is now 9-0, shockingly undefeated, just really controls their own destiny as much as you can when you're a Big 12 team, not named Texas or Oklahoma when it comes to the postseason. And Texas had a period of struggle, but it looks to have found its quarterback of the future. And if it didn't, it's got the quarterback of the future coming in behind it. So it feels like, though, this isn't the season where maybe they're going to crest over the edge. They still control their own destiny as far as getting into the Big 12 championship game and playing in a New Year's Six Bowl. Is Texas back?
What is back? Like that's the real question. No, Texas is something. I think I'm older than I look, right? I'm 36. I was there for like the Vince Young and Colt McCoy years. So like for me, like that's what back is. And Texas is not to that. But I think Texas is on the cusp of getting back to relevance, right? Because Texas has only been relevant as a meme for the last like decade, right? That's what it is. And that's fine. Like I'm told, like we deserve it. Most of our fans make it really easy for people to do that. But so I think like Texas is back to not being the laughing stock, not being the punching bag. Like there are still a lot of things you can make fun of about this team, and this rightfully so. But I think there is there's something that feels like it's shifting, and I think it's not quite shifted yet. I've been waiting for a couple of years, even under Tom Herman, for them to kind of make that final turn around the corner. And then Tom Herman kind of got fired for a lot of things that were mixed up in it. We'll just leave that there.
Are we on the anniversary of Monkey Stripper Pole? I feel like that's somewhere around here. Yeah,
that was last Halloween. Halloween. So yeah, the pole assassin saga is a year old as of last week, but just all sorts of weirdness. But to answer your question, like I hate the phrase Texas is back, right? I kind of hate Joe Tessitore a little bit for saying that. But when push comes to shove, like Texas has a legit shot at a Big 12 championship. We haven't been able to say that outside of one other time for the last 10 years.
Well, and I think, too, the difference between Texas is the talent has always been there. Texas has never not been able to recruit at an extraordinarily high level, but the competency and how that talent was used has been lacking. It seems like Steve Sarkisian has at least come in and kind of like set the course for the ship and studied the waters as much as you possibly can, dealing with everything else that comes with being the head football coach at Texas, right?
Yeah.
And that he is not only gathering talent, but knows how to use it and knows how to run a program around it.
Yeah. And I think this is blasphemous, but I think like for me, the most important hire of the staff was Kyle Flood. If you go and look back at a lot of the recruiting rankings under Charlie Strong, under even Tom Herman, it was floated by a lot of skill players, and the offensive line was really neglected. And so there's like this weird misnomer, like Texas could always recruit. Yeah, except for the offensive and defensive line. And so a big reason why I think Texas has progressed is because they've made a commitment. They took Kyle Flood. You see what happened to Alabama's offensive line the last 2 seasons. There's been a difference. And so for me, it's like getting the little things right, getting the details right. Like it's really easy to overlook the offensive line when a 5-star wide receiver walks in the door, but like a 4-star offensive tackle that can hold the left side of your line for 3 years is super important too. And so, there's something to be said about learning how to do it under Nick Saban. Like nobody is going to be Nick Saban, but something's going to rub off if you're there for a couple of years. And so hopefully he's picked up the right things from that. And it seems like things are turning. Kids are buying into him. As of we're recording this earlier in the week, and Texas is on the cusp of, they flipped a kid from OU. They're going to flip a 5-star kid from A&M. So like the kids are buying in. And I think the recruits will always tell you like where the momentum is. And that to me, if the best linebacker in the state of Texas from the last probably 5 years wants to get into what's going on in Austin, then I feel pretty okay about it.
Well, in this season, I think there's been enough high points for the Longhorns, even though the low points have been pretty low. The high points have been pretty good too. And so you can, like you said, you can look at the 1 point loss to Alabama, which if Quinn Ewers plays the whole game, maybe that ends differently. Alabama obviously now looks a little bit more vulnerable than we've seen them, but still would have been a significant win to start the season. Hudson Card did his darndest, but the loss at Texas Tech happens. Then you go in and you dominate the Red River rivalry in a way that just doesn't happen in that game. The Oklahoma State, like that was an Oklahoma State could still field a team right now. I think I heard something like they were down like 11 starters or 12 starters, I think last week. So the Big 12 remains kind of a jumbled cluster of chaos. And Texas has been in the middle of it. But like we said at the beginning, you look at this now with 3 games remaining and the Big 12 championship game is firmly in the picture of a possibility. Is covering this team and watching this team, being a fan of this team, do you feel like there's enough positive momentum that getting to a Big 12 championship, winning a Big 12 championship would firmly replant Texas as the program to be in the state?
I'll say it like this. Tom Herman did it once and then got fired 2 years later. So once can be a coincidence, twice is a trend. And so, being in this position for multiple years, especially as Texas gets ready to head to the SEC, like I said, Tom Herman did it once. He managed to get there. He managed to play against OU in there, and he couldn't quite get it done. They went to a New Year's Six bowl and got it. So I think, for me, I want to see it multiple times. I want to see, and again, that seems like, and I don't expect Texas to win the conference championship this year. It's hard to beat the same team twice, and they're going to have to do that to do so. But I think being competitive, being in the conversation in the last couple of weeks of the season is where you want to be. And I think the Big 12, especially this year, is just a big ball of knives. Just every week, it's chaos, and so it's hard. It's hard to win the Big 12. Let's just say it. Like, it's one of the hardest leagues from top to bottom. If you look at a lot of the average advanced statistical models, like the Big 12 is 10 or 15 points ahead of the SEC as far as like average rating goes. So it's a tough league. And so being competitive deep into the season, like not being at the bottom, right? Like I feel bad for all of our friends in Ames or in Morgantown right now. Like that's the position you don't want to be in. And so being competitive for me being competitive in multiple years is really what I would hope to see out of Sark in Texas.
I mean, you say that, you talk about the Big 12, and I think a big ball of knives is an apt description. I mean, Iowa State, West Virginia are kind of pulling up the rear, but Iowa State could be bowl eligible if they went out. I mean, you're looking at a very distinct I don't know if it works out, because I think Iowa State and West Virginia have to play each other still, but there's a possibility you could have 8 or 9 bowl eligible teams in this conference. And now that Kansas is a bowl team, there's no, you don't get to play Missouri and Vanderbilt. And I mean, things are going to get easier for Texas when they go to the SEC, right? That's how that works. I want to talk kind of about, I think these two programs this season have been polar opposites in ways. And it seems like Texas tends to start really strong and fades a little bit in the stretch. I watched a lot of that Kansas State game. They were in control. It never felt like they weren't going to win. Also, what in the heck was Chris Kleiman doing by going with Adrian Martinez after the way Will Howard has played? But that's neither here nor there. But to go out and get that game, to hold on for dear life in that fourth quarter in a very tough environment against a very, very good Kansas State team, which basically, like I said, puts you in the driver's seat for the Big 12 championship, says a lot about the program. TCU, on the other hand, has been a team that tends to start slow and finish in just a ball of hellfire. What is it about, like, what needs to change for Texas to be able to kind of put together those 4 complete quarters? Do you notice the trend of the second half slippage, or do you think it's kind of just an anomaly at this point in the season?
No, it's absolutely a trend. If you listen to our podcast or follow us on Twitter, I'm very angry about this. There and for me, the like, and I don't mean to insult anyone. We hear a lot of people talking about the defense is struggling late. The defense is struggling late. And I'm like, guys, the defense got 4 3-and-outs to start the second half of the game, and the offense went right back out and put them back out on the field. So like, one of the things that I think we see, and everybody knows about Sark, Sark is an offensive genius, and there's no two ways around it. But the deficiency for Sark, I think at this point, what we're seeing is that he's an incredible scripter and pregame planner, but there's a deficiency when it comes to halftime adjustments, and he's gotten out schemed every week. And that was the big issue at Oklahoma State. It's why what happened. Texas was running all up and down Oklahoma State in the first half. Oklahoma State tweaked some things in the interior of their defense in the second half, and Texas couldn't get anything going. Then Texas was unable to hit something over the top because of the crazy wind. And Ewers, I think, is still dealing with some of the shoulder issues, the collarbone issues from earlier in the season. And so Oklahoma State was able to key in on what Texas was doing, and they couldn't get anything going. And so that to me is the issue, is like, how does Sark figure out the tweaks, the changes at halftime? Because that to me is the differentiator, and that's why Texas has seen these fades. And I was looking at it today. I took my son to Taekwondo practice, and I was looking at some stuff online. TCU is second in the country in fourth quarter scoring differential, and Texas is 53rd, I think was the number I saw. That is absolutely terrifying. Like, the dumbest of all the dumb things about being a Texas fan of the last like 10 years, the fact that going into the fourth quarter leading by 10 points, I don't feel comfortable ever, is just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's going to be really interesting. And I think that, TCU's been successful in part because they've been healthy, and you can kind of wear teams down the fourth quarter. And then, as we've seen, that both the Garrett Riley, Sonny Dykes duo on offense and the Joe Gillespie on defense, the halftime adjustments have been unbelievable. So the combination of being able to wear teams down physically and then also being able to make those adjustments has kept TCU in some of these games that, I mean, unquestionably they would have lost a season ago or any of the last 4 seasons. You talked about Quinn Ewers. I want to talk about him. He came up high school, so much hype, played for one of the elite programs, had the $1 million deal, goes to Ohio State just to hang out with Ryan Day for a year, comes back home to, the beard, like, how do you get over the beard and the hairline? Of course, like, no wonder. So comes back down to Austin and comes out against Alabama and just looks the superstar part. But he struggled a little bit. I think I saw that since the Oklahoma game, he's completing, I think, less than 50% of his passes. You mentioned that there's been some weather issues and maybe some health issues. I noticed the same thing. And RG3, like, he's kind of fun to laugh at as a broadcaster. But when he does something well, he does it really extraordinarily well. And when TCU was playing Oklahoma, they talked about Dylan Gabriel not setting his feet, and that was what was leading to the overthrows. I feel like I've seen some of the same issues with Quinn. Is this just an inexperience? He's still a young guy. Is this the injury issues? Maybe a little bit of everything. What do you think has kind of been the difference the last couple of weeks of the season?
Yeah, I think part of it is the fact that he's playing like his first substantive football since like December of 2020. And so he's still acclimating to some of it. And part of, he was the best player by 50 yards in any game he played in high school. And so some things that he could do and get away with in high school when you're playing, random Dallas ISD school in the playoffs, you can't do when you're playing against Big 12 competition. I make fun of Bob Stoops a lot because I'm a Texas fan, right? But one of the things that he would always say when they lose a game they shouldn't is, well, their guys have scholarships too, right? Like, and so that to me is the thing that you have to remember with when you're playing like Quinn is it's like they're scholarship athletes on the other side of the field, and especially at TCU, like they have been coached up. They're great athletes. They've got speed out the wazoo. Like, that is a terrifying defense to play against. And so I think for him, part of it is that, like, young quarterback learning how to play the game well. I think part of it is also on the road specifically, he seems to not be as comfortable going through his reads. He'll lock in on his first receiver. He'll lock in on Xavier Worthy when he has a tight end underneath for 6 yards. He'll try to hit the home run instead of taking the double, right? And I'm like, hey, kid, doubles win games too. So like, that to me is part of it, as well as like him not going through his progressions as well. When he gets a little rattled, when it is squeaky bum time, he kind of locks in on his guy, and it's not quite as well as accurate or as the decisions aren't as clean as they should be. And then I think since the injury, there's been a little air under his deep ball. And I'm not sure if it's his shoulder still being uncomfortable or what it is, but there's a little bit of air under his deep ball. And this sounds like a dumb excuse, but the last 2 road games, 24 and 17-mile-an-hour winds. You put the ball up any higher than it should be, and the wind's going to do something weird with it. So I think it's a combination of all those 3 things, but they've got to figure it out if they're going to win these next 3 games.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that we have seen about him is that he really does turn it up when the lights are brightest. And there's certainly going to be every eye on Austin this weekend.
Yep.
TCU getting that number 4 ranking is going to make them a national conversation. Texas is always a national conversation. Before game day decided that they were going to Austin, this was a prime time ABC game. Do you kind of think he's going to be able to rise to the occasion? Do you think that all of this extra attention is a good thing or a bad thing for the Texas program?
That's a tough question. I think it's never a bad thing, especially when you're again, this is like prime recruiting season, right? Your early signing days in a month. So like having more eyes, more cameras on your program when you're trying to flip a 5-star linebacker from A&M is not a bad thing. But I think from Quinn's a gamer. Like it is what it is. He wants he thrives under that pressure. He's the kid that loved being, and he's not like the big media interview guy, but he likes being the guy on the field when the cameras are on and the lights are bright. And so that plays well for him. I think this is a Texas team that I think in more so than years past can deal with some of the weird mental stuff that has happened. And especially I think this is going to sound silly, but holding on and managing to come up with a game-winning play against Kansas State, like it's going to happen again. It didn't happen, right? Everybody can unclinch, everybody can relax the shoulders. And so some of it might be that as well, because a lot of what has happened for Texas that hasn't just been scheme, it's been execution in the second half. Receivers running the wrong routes, linemen, procedure penalties, false start penalties. Texas had like 9 false starts against Oklahoma State in that ridiculous second half meltdown, right? So like a lot of that is stuff that like, okay, we're at home. It's a game day crowd, but DKR is going to be rocking. Relax your shoulders. They're there to cheer you on. Like get out of your own heads, kid. And like, let's do something.
Well, I don't really want to talk about Bijan Robinson, but I feel contractually obligated to talk about Bijan Robinson. He's really good.
He is.
What else do we need to say about this kid? We've seen so many great running backs come through Texas, obviously. Like there's a long history of just super talented guys. And I'm not saying that Bijan belongs in that, upper echelon, but I'm just saying that he does things that none of those guys did, right? Like he can run the ball, he pass blocks, he understands the scheme, he can get out, he can catch the ball. He's impossible to bring down, but he can run away from you too. And it seems like he's better this year than he's been ever before. Maybe because he has, like, no offense to previous Texas quarterbacks, but the most competent quarterbacking play behind him when it comes to being able to execute an offensive system. What is one thing as a fan, as a guy that watches this kid every single week, that you really appreciate about Bijan Robinson, the player?
Oh man, the player himself, I think it is really just his ability. Like contact balance is one of those weird like football nerd things that you hear people talk about, but the way that he can like take a bump and not lean over, he can take a hit and keep his feet underneath him. Like I don't know if it looks like he's like doing ballet out there sometimes. I'm like, how do his feet do that? How does his body contort that way? Like I think back to 3 years ago, this clip is going viral again for some reason, but like the kid is crazy flexible. 3 years ago against Tech, he tried to hurdle somebody, gets hit in the back and like is bent over completely. Looks like a scorpion, and like he just gets up and jogs off the field and he has a muscle strain in his back. Like I would be in a wheelchair permanently if that happened to me. Like I sneeze wrong at this point in my life and I'm out for a couple of days, right? So like the flexibility, the contact balance, his ability to like just contort his body to take, if you give him an inch, he's going to take 6 yards or 6 points even. So like that to me is really like how he can the body control and the contact balance is just out of this world. And he's a great kid. Like you can't be mad about that.
He does seem like he's a really great human being too, which just makes me even angrier. Last year he had a decent game against the Horned Frogs in a season where it was very normal to rush for 200 yards against TCU. He rushed for 216, 2 touchdowns, 35 carries. Just like people were TCU fans were complaining after the game because they thought that Sark ran him too much, but that was only because that's the first time Texas has beat TCU in a couple of years, and they didn't want Bijan to be the guy to do it. I think that there's a lot more balance in that offense this year, obviously, and Roschon Johnson has been great as well. You said really nice things about the TCU defense, and I don't know if I agree with some of them. They've been really good in the second half, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. But the first half, it's pretty easy to gash them up a little bit. And with D Winters missing the first half of the Texas game, there's going to be opportunities. I think that's going to be really the thing to watch is Bijan Robinson versus the skeleton crew remaining for TCU at linebacker. I think he can have a field day. I do not want to see Johnny Hodges, God bless his soul, try to tackle Bijan Robinson in the open field. I don't think anybody wants to see that except for Texas fans. So
I might, yeah.
Yeah, you might enjoy that. Let's flip the script because we've gone on way too long without talking about the thing that we have to talk about, and that's the Texas defense. And the Texas defense at least is being slightly influenced by a guy that knows TCU pretty well. Might have heard of him. His name is Gary something. Patterson got a statue in front of M&G Carter Stadium. Maybe as the candidate for the Nebraska job we're hearing now. I mean, all kinds of things. Yeah. So what if, from the outside looking in, what do you think that Gary's, how much influence does he really have on that Texas defense, and what role do you think he's played? Steve Sarkisian could not say enough nice things about him at Big 12 Media Days, but I don't know how much of that was this is what's actually going on versus how much of this is I just want to rub at TCU's face a little bit. What are your impressions of what's really going down with Gary in Austin?
It depends on which message board poster you're reading at the day. If it's Pete Kwiatkowski, and really like the dumb thing, like Texas fans, if the defense looks good in their belief, it's all Gary, and if the defense looks bad, it's all Kwiatkowski. But I think a lot of what Gary Patterson's role, at least publicly, is what they said, is more on like the self-scouting side of things, where he is breaking down, and it sounds like almost beneath him at this point, which whatever, but like he is really giving Texas information about themselves that, like, when you talk to anybody, like it's always hard to scout yourself the most. And so that's the critical eye that I think he can bring. And he knows the league, right? Pete Kwiatkowski is a Pac-12 guy coming in to try to figure out the Big 12. And I don't think there's anybody on the planet, it's like an objective fact, that has spent more time coaching in the Big 12 than Gary Patterson.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to figure out how do you tweak and morph a West Coast-ish system to fit the Big 12 is a unique offensive monster. It is what it is. Like there's no two ways around it. So part of that is like getting the wisdom from, like, no matter how the TCU era for Gary Patterson ends, Gary Patterson is one of the best defensive minds that's coached in the last couple of decades, and TCU benefited from a lot of that. And so he is bringing a lot of like that elder Big 12 knowledge, the how do I tweak and adjust these things that we like to do schematically. And I hope, honestly, I hope he's been very involved in the game planning this week. I mean, again, I selfishly, right? But like for me, or from what I've seen, it's been a lot of like the self-scouting, the getting intel on yourself. That's always hard to get when you're in the middle of like a game plan week.
Yeah, and I think just having Steve Sarkisian is obviously, he's been around college football a long time. He's been a head coach. He's had his good moments and his bad moments. But just having somebody that's that kind of a veteran leader that knows the league and knows what he's doing around the Big 12 got to have been just a great soundboard for him, if nothing else. Yeah. So I'm sure there's absolute value. And I mean, frankly, I think most TCU fans wish that had Gary handled his exit a little bit differently, or maybe Jeremiah Donati, depending on, again, what message boards you read, who handled things poorly, but that he could be doing that same thing in Fort Worth. And I think TCU fans would be a lot happier. It does add a really great story. And I can't wait until the game day package on Gary Patterson prepping for TCU airs, just to make me angry all over again. All right. Well, this Texas defense, whoever's in charge of it, is going to be up for a stiff challenge on Saturday. How do you think that they match up with Texas Tech slowed down TCU? I don't know what that says, but with Quentin Johnson expected to be full bore for Saturday, Kendre Miller's been great, and there's obviously a lot of weapons. Do you expect Texas to be able to slow this offense down, or do you think this is really just going to be a run up and down the field shootout? Like not Houston SMU level, but maybe something close to that.
It's hard for me to know, because I don't like, TCU has been an incredible like passing team, but regardless of like what that offense is, they're still going to want to run the ball, and they're still going to want to maintain balance. And I think when I look at the Texas defense, the one thing I'm confident in is the run defense. And so that to me is like the matchup I'm watching is like, can the Texas run defense play as well as it has been in recent past and turn TCU one dimensional, right? Because anytime a team is one dimensional, the pendulum swings to the opponent. But I am the big problem with the Texas defense at this point has been eye discipline when they're in zone, especially against scrambling quarterbacks. This is actually a really good man coverage defense. They've got big bodies, they've got fast bodies, they've got good athletes back there. But because of the quarterbacks that they've played week in and week out, and again, Max Duggan is a guy who's got wheels, they've had to play a ton of zone, and there have been some weird handoffs and exchanges between zones in the middle of the field, especially when the misdirections come, when the motion comes, when those things happen. The linebackers and the safeties don't necessarily talk as much as they should at some spots. And so that's been the big issue is teams have been able to gash them up the seam and kind of in that soft part of the middle of the defense. And so what does that look like? What adjustments can they make? Because that is how Kansas State got and made the comeback. They just trotted Deuce Vaughn right behind the linebackers. They dumped it over his head, and then Deuce Vaughn did what Deuce Vaughn does, and it just disappears and reappears in the end zone. So like that to me is the big issue and the thing that scares me. Obviously Quentin Johnston being healthy, I will never get over the heartbreak of Quentin Johnston flipping like 3 days before signing day. He's on my all-time list of the ones that got away. But him being healthy for this game, great for him. I'm pissed about it. But for Texas, like that to me is going to be the question is like, have they cleaned up that middle part of that zone defense? Because the boundaries have been fine. Honestly, Deshaun Jameson caught a lot of flack last year. He has had a pretty solid contract year. Ryan Watts came in as a transfer and is holding down the opposite side of the field from him. And they've both been really good. But when it gets to the middle part, the nickel back and the safeties, there's just something that's off. And so that if TCU doesn't attack that part of the field, you should fire the entire coaching staff.
Well, that's been my favorite conspiracy theory to come out of the Texas Tech win is that, Jared Wiley has disappeared for the last 2 weeks after being absolutely dominant against Kansas State. And, he just happens to be a transfer from Texas, which is interesting. And the game plan was super vanilla. There was not a lot of motion. There was not a lot of play action against Texas Tech. And the great Grant McGalliard on the Purple Theory podcast said that he's hoping that this was all part of the master plan to keep all the good stuff off of film for UT so that they could show him a little something different. That actually tracks with what you're saying. So maybe we can hope that we looked so sloppy on offense against Texas Tech because we were saving the good stuff for Texas. All right. In our last couple of minutes, we got to get down to the important things. This is such a massive game for both programs. Not when you just talk about bragging rights in the state, not when you just talk about TCU having a chance to secure a spot in the college football playoffs, but this game has major implications for the Big 12 and for the title race. How do you see Saturday playing out? Is Texas, I don't even think it's an upset, right? TCU's coming in as number 4 in the country and an underdog in Austin. I think I've seen some that are up to a touchdown, which seems kind of insane to me. How do you think this is going to go? Who's got the advantage? And for Texas to win, what's going to be the thing that you look at and you go, oh yeah, this was the moment or this was the reason?
Yeah, I think I don't know how it's going. I'm terrible at predictions. That's why I don't bet, right? Because I would not have a house or a car or food for my children. But I think when you phrase it like, what does Texas need to do to win? I think if Texas can hit a couple of deep shots, that's been the differentiator. When the offenses look good, when the offense has been humming, Quinn Ewers and Xavier Worthy connect on a deep one, or Jatavian Sanders, a 5-star tight end who's a matchup nightmare for folks, just goes and mosses somebody in the back corner of the end zone, right? Those are the things that I think unlock the Texas defense, and then that lets Bijan do what Bijan does, and so that to me, like I'm not like the old school established the run kind of football guy, but I want the TCU offense on the sideline as much as possible. Like run clock, feed Bijan. When Bijan needs a spell, feed Roschon. When Roschon needs a spell, bring Keelan Robinson in and have him run a couple of like I want Max Duggan and those weapons on the sideline as much as possible. And so trust the interior of your line, trust that they can get it done, trust Kyle Flood to have a great plan for that blocking scheme, and let Bijan do what Bijan does. And I think that is going to be the key to the game for Texas. And really, like, how many points are they up at halftime, right? If Texas is not up more than about 3 or 4 scores at halftime, then I'm going to call it a loss and I'm going to go start pouring my first bourbon of the evening.
Do you expect, I mean, you don't have to give me a score prediction, but do you think Texas pulls this one off, or do you think TCU could come in and shut out the noise and get the win?
I have such a hard time reading this one. Honestly, when I saw the 6.5 point line opening, I was like, nope, that doesn't make sense to me. But like Parker Fleming, guy, Stats War, good guy over there. Like he has Texas by like 3 points. A lot of it is it's a field goal game either way is what I've seen. And so I think it's going to come down to the foot of somebody. Bert Auburn has been good, not great. So that to me, I think if it's a field goal game feels right, I can't tell you who.
The other fun wrinkle in this is you talk about Bert Auburn. You know who he was trained by? Jaden Obercrom.
There you go.
I mean, the parallels of this one are unbelievable. I will put on record for the first time. I think that TCU loses this game in Austin and beats them in the rematch in the Big 12 championship.
I could see that. I could very well see that. And that also guarantees that the Big 12 has 2 teams on New Year's Day. So like more power to everybody.
Would be great. Yeah, would be awesome. All right, Gerald, tell folks where they can find you, where they can find your work.
Absolutely. So if you want just Texas football, I'm kind of a troll on that one at Longhorn Pod. It's what I do when I'm bored. Our podcast, Burn Orange Nation podcast feed, we're the Longhorn Republic. Follow me personally at GH Goodridge on Twitter. I do more movies and social commentary and stuff like that over there. So if that's your thing, I talk a lot about my kids too. My kids are I have 3 small children and they're all insane. So that's me. Thank you. It's been too long. It's only been like a couple months, but it's been too long.
Been too long. Hey, I want to say though too, you don't have to worry about telling people that you troll from the Longhorn Pod account because you are part of Burn Orange Nation, and so like nothing you can do will touch what BON does or has done just this season alone. So in the troll department, fear not.
We hired the right guy to run that Twitter account. Interactions are interactions, right?
No such thing as bad clicks, I guess. Gerald, always a pleasure. Always love talking to you. Love talking football with you. Give him a follow, guys. Gerald's great. And like I said, if you want great Texas commentary, which is a touch of the trolling, this is the guy to go to for sure.
Thanks.